25, I'm 86. The secret about my first pregnancy was written in the family Bible. The family Bible sits on my knees, and the cracked calfskin cover feels colder than the room. When I open it, the spine gives one dry little pop, the same sound it made in Mama's hands, and a pinch of dust rises into the lamplight. On the page for births, my name is written twice. The first Sarah is in black ink. The second is in pencil. Between them, beside a date from 1957, someone has pressed one sentence so hard the nib tore the paper. I can still feel the ridge beneath my thumb. Under that sentence is a baby's name I've never spoken out loud, crossed through with 3 straight lines, all drawn by the same right hand. Mama told me my first pregnancy began after my wedding. The Bible says otherwise. And there's something else. A small brown mark near the edge, shaped like a thumbprint, and a scrap of blue thread caught in the binding. I know that thread. It came from the dress I wore the night my sister Ruth locked the washroom door and whispered, "Don't let Dat see you crying." I remember it was raining. No, wait. The rain came the next morning. That night, the pump handle was frozen, the upstairs hall smelled like lye soap, and nobody looked at me during supper. For 68 years, I thought the secret belonged to me. It didn't. I'm Sarah, an Amish mother, and I am 86 years old. Quick pause. My name is Sarah, and this is Rebecca Amish Home. If these stories make you feel less alone, subscribe. It's free, and it keeps them alive. Tell me in the comments, what truth did your family hide in plain sight? And if you want to go further, a super chat or membership, you're saying these voices are worth hearing. Now, back to what happened. The first thing you have to understand is that where I grew up, a girl's body belonged to God, then to her father, then to her husband, and nobody ever said those words in that order. They didn't have to. We learned it in the way Ma'am folded our dresses high at the neck, in the way the bishop's wife lowered her voice when she said, "expecting," in the way every girl left the room when the married women began whispering over coffee. Our ordning was mostly spoken, but the rules about a woman's body lived deeper than speech. You felt them in your shoulders. You kept them tucked in. The Bible on our shelf held birth dates, wedding dates, and deaths, but no one explained how one led to another. That's the thing nobody tells you. Silence can be taught as cleanly as any hymn. By 16, I could harness a nervous mare in sleet, bake 12 loaves before dawn, and tell by smell when milk had turned, but I couldn't name half the parts of my own body. The rule showed itself in small things. At washing day, Aunt Lena would slap wet shirts against the board, while the younger girls carried baskets and pretended not to hear the married women stop talking when we came near. If a bride walked stiffly after her wedding, no one asked why. If she cried at supper, someone passed the potatoes. I once asked Ma'am why Cousin Mary slept in the sewing room for 2 weeks after she married, and Ma'am's fingers froze on a shirt button the size of a bean. Then she said, "Some questions make trouble," and bit the thread with her teeth. I was 12. I remember thinking trouble must be something you could catch by speaking, like sparks in dry hay. So I swallowed the question. That's how it worked. Nobody struck the table. Nobody shouted. A woman's raised eyebrow could close a door faster than a lock, and by the time Ruth came to me with that blue dress folded over her arm, I already knew which questions would cost me the whole room. Ruth was 19 then, 3 years older than me, and already married to Eli Stoltzfus, who made wagon wheels so smooth you could run your palm over the rim without catching a splinter. She came into our room, 14 days before my wedding, and laid the blue dress across my bed. Not 13 days. 14, because it was a Monday, and Ma'am had boiled sheets in the copper kettle downstairs. Ruth gave me 11 words. I counted them later. Be still, pray hard, and don't make him feel ashamed. That was all. She wouldn't meet my eyes, and she kept rubbing the pale mark where her wedding band had pinched her finger. My husband-to-be, Daniel, had been told even less. His father took him behind the harness shop and said marriage would come natural. 2 words pretending to be wisdom. We were both being sent towards something neither of us could see, carrying shame like a lantern with no flame. Daniel wasn't cruel, I need that said plain. He was 23, no, 24. I always make him younger in my mind. He had one front tooth that turned slightly inward, and when he laughed, he covered it with the back of his hand, as if joy itself needed manners. We met at a barn raising near Gap, where he handed me a cup of water from a blue enamel dipper and apologized because his thumb had touched the rim. I liked that about him. He was careful with small things. Once, when my bonnet string tore, he stood behind the smokehouse and fixed it with waxed harness thread, his hands shaking harder than mine. I thought that meant I'd be safe with him. Maybe I was, in the ways he knew how to make safe. He could calm a horse by speaking low into its ear, but he had no words for fear between 2 people, and neither did I. That missing language sat between us before we ever shared a room. The week before the wedding, women arrived with pies, quilts, and advice that sounded useful until I needed it. Aunt Lena said, "Keep your home sweet." Ma'am said, "A wife doesn't refuse her husband." The bishop's wife pressed a jar of raspberry jam into my hands and told me to remember gratitude. No one told me I could ask Daniel to stop. No one told him he should look for my yes instead of my silence. On Thursday, Ruth found me pinning my apron hem by the south window, where a dead fly had been trapped between the glass panes since summer. She opened her mouth, closed it, then said, "It gets easier." I almost asked what "it" was, but downstairs, Ma'am dropped a spoon, and the sound made Ruth step back, as if she'd been caught stealing. The night before I married, I lay awake counting the ceiling boards. There were 27. By dawn, I had counted them 6 times, and still didn't know what waited beyond the bedroom door. The room is smaller than I remember. I see that now when I close my eyes. A kerosene lamp sits on a washstand with a chipped white basin, and the flame leans each time wind slips through the window frame. The quilt is wedding ring pattern, red and cream, with one green patch that doesn't match because Ruth ran out of cloth. Outside, a buggy wheel crunches over frozen ruts, then fades. The room smells of lamp oil, cedar shavings, and the lye soap Daniel used until his knuckles shone pink. I'm wearing a white nightdress ma'am sewed from muslin so stiff it scratches under my arms. My feet are cold. Daniel stands by the door, twisting the seam of his left sleeve, over and over. He looks at the floor, then at me, then at the floor again. I think, absurdly, that the lamp glass needs cleaning. That's where my mind goes, to soot, to chores, anywhere but my own body. He says, "Sarah?" I say, "Yes," though he hasn't asked a question. His breath catches, and he gives a small laugh that isn't laughter. Then he sits on the edge of the bed, leaving a whole arm's length between us. The mattress rope creaks beneath him. I can hear my pulse in my ears, thick and dull, and somewhere in the wall a mouse scratches 3 times, stops, then starts again. Daniel reaches for my hand, but his palm is damp, and our fingers slide before they hold. "My father said," he begins, then nothing. I wait. He swallows. "We're married now." I nod because nodding is what I know. In church, in the kitchen, at the table, my body has been trained to answer before my mouth does. He moves closer. I want him near because I love him. I think I love him. And I want the door open, the lamp bright, Ruth sitting between us, explaining everything. His hand moves. I stop breathing. He asks, "Is this right?" And I whisper, "I don't know." That should have been enough to pause the whole night, but neither of us knows that. He thinks my fear is modesty. I think his uncertainty is a test I'm failing. When the moment turns painful, my jaw locks so hard the hinge aches for days. I press both hands flat against the quilt and stare at the green patch near my shoulder. "Wait," I say once, so softly. Daniel freezes, then asks, "Did I hurt you?" I tell him no. I tell him no because Ruth said not to shame him, because Ma'am said a wife doesn't refuse, because every woman I know has taught me that kindness means leaving myself out of the room. He isn't trying to take something. I'm trying to give what I was told was owed. That's the thing nobody tells you. Two frightened people can harm each other while both are trying to be good. Afterward, Daniel turns the lamp down until the walls go brown. He says, "I'm sorry," but he says it toward the ceiling, and I say, "It's all right," toward the quilt. Neither sentence is true, yet both are meant kindly. My legs tremble when I stand, so I pretend I'm looking for my stockings under the chair. There's a loose thread on the green patch, and I pull it until the seam puckers. Then I smooth it flat and pull again. Daniel brings me water in the blue enamel cup we'd packed from Ma'am's kitchen. I take one sip. The rim tastes faintly of iron. He lies down with his back to me, not from coldness, I know now, but shame. I lie beside him and count his breaths. At 43, he whispers my name. I keep my eyes closed. Before dawn, when the rooster gives one broken call, I feel the first deep cramp and understand only that something inside me has changed. 3 weeks later, I'm sick behind the smokehouse before breakfast, one hand braced on the frosted boards. Ma'am finds me there and doesn't ask when it started. She looks at my face, then at my belly, then toward the house where Daniel is drinking coffee with Dat. Her mouth tightens. The wedding date was written in ink. My last monthly bleeding, something we barely named, had ended more than 5 weeks before it. I remember, no, actually, wait. It was closer to 6. That matters, because the child could not have begun on my wedding night. Ma'am knew. Ruth knew enough to know. And the Bible, later, would hold the date they chose to hide. No doctor examined me. No one asked whether someone had touched me before Daniel. Instead, Ma'am said, "We'll count from the wedding," and wiped my mouth with the corner of her apron, the one printed with tiny brown acorns. A whole truth was moved by 6 weeks with one sentence. Neither Daniel nor I understood what pregnancy timing meant. We didn't know that weeks are counted from the last bleeding, or that a child's likely beginning can be estimated, or that my sickness had started too soon for the story everyone told. More than that, I didn't know I had the right to name the night in the washroom 2 months before the wedding, when an older relative came in after Ruth left and closed the door behind him. I'm not going to give him more space than that. He was not some monster from a tale. He was trusted, which is worse in a quieter way. Years later, a nurse showed me a simple calendar wheel and said, "This date doesn't fit your wedding." My hands went cold before my mind caught up. The secret in the Bible wasn't that I had sinned. It was that the adults had done the counting, recognized the truth, and changed the record instead of asking me one question. After that, I learned to leave my body without moving an inch. I fixed my eyes on the bird-shaped watermark above the bedpost and counted backward from 100. By the time Daniel reached for me, I was somewhere else, kneading dough, gathering eggs, walking the fence line. He never knew. I barely understood it at first. I just knew that if I made myself small enough inside, the rest of me could stay still. We built a marriage around that silence. On good nights, he rubbed my feet with goose grease when they swelled. On hard nights, I crept to the cold stove after he slept, holding a spoon. I wasn't hungry. I just needed something metal to hold. That was my grand survival plan. A spoon and a dark kitchen. Not exactly the stuff of heroic songs. By our second year, I could tell what kind of night it would be by the way Daniel hung his hat. Brim down meant tired. Brim up meant he wanted closeness. I learned to keep busy after supper, polishing jars already clean, mending good socks, checking the latch twice. He learned to ask less with words and more with silence, because silence was all we had. Sometimes his hand on my shoulder raised love and dread together, like two hens in a sack. I loved him. I resented him. I felt sorry for him. All three were true before the lamp went out. And when I was carrying our second child, he carved a cradle from maple and sanded the rails until they felt like worn river stones. I watched his hands and thought, how can the hands that make this also frighten me? I didn't know what to call that. I still don't, not fully. At Quilting Bee, the women spoke in pieces. You learned to hear the missing half. One Tuesday, Ruth sat across from me stitching a black star into a yellow square, while Aunt Lena poured chicory coffee from the pot with the bent spout. Ruth's needle stopped when Mary whispered, "Does it ever stop hurting?" Nobody looked up. Aunt Lena said, "Marriage takes patience." Mary nodded once and pushed the needle through so hard it pricked her thumb. A red bead rose, bright as sealing wax. I nearly said, "Mine hurts too." The words came all the way to my teeth. Then Ruth met my eyes and gave the smallest shake of her head, not warning me against Mary, protecting me from the room. That's when I knew. Not guessed. Knew. We were all carrying versions of the same locked box, and every woman had been taught to guard the key from herself. Mary's story came out in scraps over 3 winters. Her husband, Jacob, woke her before dawn because he said nighttime made him feel ashamed. She would lie rigid beneath a quilt her mother had pieced from feed sacks while the cows stamped in the barn. "I go somewhere else," she told me once, rubbing beeswax into her thread. 4 words. I wanted to ask where. Instead, I said, "Me too." Ruth dropped her thimble. It rolled under the table and tapped the leg twice, and all 3 of us went quiet. Later, the bishop's wife found Mary crying behind the washhouse and gave her a tract about cheerful obedience. No one asked what had happened. Questions were turned into duties, and pain was turned into proof that you needed more faith. The silence protected itself by making every hurt woman feel like the weak beam in an otherwise sound barn. 4 months later, Mary was expecting again. I am 72 when the word finally reaches me. I'm sitting in a county clinic with a plastic fern in the corner and a magazine from 3 years before lying open to a recipe for peach cobbler. Daniel has been dead 6 months. A young nurse named Carla sets a sheet of paper on the table between us. It shows 2 circles, one marked yes and one marked no, with an arrow between them. At the top is one word, consent. She says, "It has to be freely given, every time." My hands jerk so hard, the paper slides onto the floor. The room goes thin around the edges. I hear the heater click. I smell the lemon cleaner on the counter. And suddenly I am 16 again, staring at that green patch in the quilt while my mouth says no softly, and then says yes, because I have been taught they mean the same thing. Carla picks up the page and doesn't touch me. That matters. She waits until I nod. Then she explains boundaries, how fear can freeze the body, how silence isn't agreement, how a person can care about you and still cross a line because neither of you understands the line is there. I'm not angry at first. I'm sad. So sad I can't lift my coat from the chair. I grieve for the girl in the stiff muslin nightdress, trying to be kind while she vanishes from herself. I grieve for Daniel, too, that lost young man pulling at his sleeve, sent into a room with a rule and no map. We were both prisoners of the same silence, though the bars cut me deeper. That's the thing nobody tells you. Learning the right word doesn't only free you. Sometimes it walks backward through your whole life and changes the name of every room. What I grieved most wasn't the pain. It was the version of us that never got a chance. Daniel asking, "Are you sure?" and knowing what the answer meant. Me being allowed to say, "Not tonight," without feeling the sky would fall. A first night with laughter, awkwardness, kindness, maybe even the lamp staying bright. I tried to explain this once to a woman at the grocery store who had left a strict church as a teenager. She squeezed my arm and said, "At least he apologized." I know she meant comfort, but apology without understanding is like patching a roof while the rain is still coming through. I stood beside a pyramid of canned peaches, listening to the store radio play a song I didn't know, and felt farther from home than I had on the day I left it. The community knew my language but buried my truth. The outside world named my truth but couldn't hear the language around it. And still, that place gave me things I cannot throw away. I miss the sound of horses before dawn, their breath steaming above the fence while harness buckles clicked in the blue cold. I miss bread from a wood oven, the bottom crust dark enough to knock with your knuckle, and ma'am brushing flour from my cheek with the back of 2 fingers. I miss my grandmother's hands when she prayed, the veins raised like blue thread beneath thin skin, her thumbs touching as if they were keeping one small promise between them. Those gifts are still real. They live in me beside the harm. I know how to make soup stretch for 12 people, how to sit with the dying without filling the room with talk, how to mend a shirt so the tear nearly disappears. I am homesick for a place that hurt me. That sentence makes no sense until it's your own. The harm was silence dressed as goodness. 5 words. I can say them now without spitting them. Beauty and harm lived in the same house, ate from the same bowls, and knelt beside the same bed. I don't have to burn the whole house down in my memory to admit which room locked from the outside. These days, I teach my granddaughters the names of things I was never allowed to name. I tell them their no can be quiet and still count. I tell my grandsons that care means waiting for a clear yes. And when I bake, I still score the loaves the way Ma'am did, 3 slashes with the knife held low. I loved her. I wish she had asked me the question. I choose truth now, even when my voice shakes badly. Both truths sit at my table now, and neither one has to leave. If you grew up somewhere your own body was kept from you like something dangerous, I see you. If you were taught that silence made you good, I see you. You survived something, and surviving is enough. You are not broken because your body remembers what your mouth was never allowed to say. You are not cruel for naming harm in people you still love. You are not ungrateful because beauty didn't cancel pain. And you are not foolish for taking years to understand what happened. Sometimes the truth arrives late because the road to you was blocked on purpose. The truth can make you tired before it makes you free. It can make you miss people who failed you and doubt yourself after midnight. None of that takes the truth away, not one bit. Let it arrive. Give it a chair. You don't have to forgive on command, leave on someone else's schedule, or explain your story in words that make other people comfortable. To the one still inside, noticing the locked doors, your noticing matters. To the one who left and still misses the smell of rain on the barn roof, missing it doesn't mean you chose wrong. To the one who stayed because love and fear shared the same table, your reasons were human. To the one who went back once, or 5 times, you are still allowed to begin again today. To the one thinking about leaving, you're allowed to move slowly and stay safe. To the one who is married, and only now realizing why your body goes still, you're not imagining it. To the one who recognized herself a few minutes ago and had to set down her phone, breathe. Put both feet on the floor. Wherever you are in this, I see you, and you are not alone. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you felt listening to this, or tell me about the one small detail that opened a door in your own memory. There is so much more I haven't said yet. I'm just getting started. There are stories I haven't been brave enough to tell, including why Ruth warned me, whose hand wrote that line in the Bible, and what happened when I finally showed the page to my oldest daughter. But I'm getting closer. Stay with Rebecca Amish home if you believe women's quiet truths deserve room to breathe. And to the members in Super Chat family, you're the reason the next story gets told. If you want to be part of that, the door is always open. For 68 years, I thought that crossed out name proved something shameful about me. Now I know it proves only how hard they worked to hide what I survived. Your body was always yours.